Hi, everyone. Welcome to my presentation. I'm Ashley. This is 5 ways to prepare your Sped classroom for hybrid or distance learning. So before I get into who I am, I'm going to go over a quick agenda because who doesn't love an agenda? So we're going to talk about today who I am, 5 tips to make your hybrid or distance learning classroom a little bit more seamless this year. Questions at the end. I'll take any questions you have. So if you have them, just jot them down and I promise I'll answer them at the end. And then I'll have just a quick few closing remarks. All right, so let's jump in. Who am I? My name is Ashley Lutz, and my day job is taking care of these 3 little munchkins. I have a 4-year-old son and boy-girl twins who just turned 2. So by day, I am a wife and a mom to these 3 littles. I am also a teacher, obviously. I taught in a self-contained middle school setting, grades 6 through 8, for 7 years. And then I recently changed positions, and I am a 3rd grade inclusive teacher or resource teacher. So I go into the general ed classroom each day, and I primarily worked in 3rd grade this last year. So I worked with 3 different teachers in the 3rd grade classroom, and I'm still considered a special education teacher, but my title is resource teacher. So some of my favorites, so you get to know me a little bit better. I am a lover of coffee, all the coffee, 3 littles, obviously. I love to go hiking on the weekends and in my free time. And anytime I get a chance to watch an episode of Friends, I'm all for it. All right, so let's dive in and talk about tip number 1. Planning is key. I know a lot of you are probably rolling your eyes going, well, obviously we plan, but planning for distance or a hybrid learning experience is a little bit different. I have tried multiple ways and varieties to get this to work over the last few months. So scope and sequence was my main thing. So when I think about planning, I think about a funnel. You want to talk large and then get down to the small. So scope and sequence, ways you can use that are your state standards. If you have state standards, or in my self-contained setting, I used aligned standards of learning where I didn't have exactly things to follow. So I used the portfolio-based assessment my students were to complete each year. I also used their IEP goals and then things I wanted them to learn before they headed off to high school in those 3 years. So I did a large general overview, and it doesn't have to be all pretty laminated on cutesy font. It could be in just a notebook that you keep to look and see exactly what you want to accomplish throughout the school year, and a minute, like a timeline to exactly feel like how long you think each thing is going to take. But in teaching, we know everything doesn't go seamlessly, but having a kind of broad timeline is best. Like I said, I also used IEP goals. And I also spoke to other teachers in the district that I worked in to see what kind of topics and units they were going to cover. And I was also asked a mentor of mine. I talked to the high school teacher who my students transitioned to and said, what kinds of things do you want my kids to know and learn? So in that self-contained setting, those 2 pieces were critical and key for me. When I moved to the elementary setting and I was in 3rd grade, my scope and sequence was already planned out for me, which was nice. It took a little bit of a burden off of me instead of having to come up with everything on my own. So from there, once your scope and sequence is planned out, you're going to look at a monthly calendar. I just printed one off of Google that was free, and I would go and mark everything that we had throughout the school, that school month, like any assemblies, any special things happening, birthdays, days off, teacher planning days, doctor's appointments that I would have, or something to that effect. I'm going to apologize too. I talk with my hands a lot, so I do apologize for that. So my monthly calendar, that helped me roughly go overview of exactly what I wanted to accomplish each month. And so I could plan it out, because sometimes if you had a 4-day weekend, you wouldn't want to start a new topic or unit the day before. So it did help me plan it out. When I was in middle school in the self-contained setting, I had A-B days. So I had 90-minute blocks, and I had those every other day. So it would take me about a 2-week period to get through a unit. I tried to make my units 5 days in a self-contained setting. So your monthly is your overview. A to-do list. This is the weekly to-do list that I use, and one of the lovely Pear Deck people is going to put a link in the chat for you so you guys can download this too. It's something that I use every single week, and I don't have a lot of fluff on there. I write exactly what I'm going to be doing, reading, science, math, all the subject areas, and exactly what I need for each day in each subject area. So if I need sticky notes for my reading lesson, I put that on there. That way, in case I suddenly have to take a day off, if I would look at it really quickly in the morning, I go, oh, rats, I totally forgot those sticky notes. It just shows you and makes it a little bit easier for you to plan ahead of time, and it takes less stress off of you. So if you're in the middle of a teaching lesson and your principal walks in to observe you, you have everything ready to go. Just makes it a little bit easier. The more over prepared you are, the better, I found, especially when you're going to go into a distance learning or a hybrid model, because we all don't know exactly what that's going to look like. So let's go on to step 2, or tip number 2. Tip number 2 is digital resources. And I am going to talk about digital resources that I personally used. There are many, many others, but I don't want to speak on those if I haven't actually used them personally. So the first one I'm going to talk about are brain breaks. This year, the expectation for distance learning in my district is going to be longer times on the computer with more face-to-face synchronous learning. So one thing I'm going to push is brain breaks. So many fun different ways to do brain breaks. I used to do these when I was teaching those 90-minute blocks to break up that, because a kid can't sit for 90 minutes without thinking off or looking away or losing their train of thought. I can't even do that. So we used to use things like Go Noodle. My kids loved those. Just Dance has YouTube videos that you can do where it's current music and current things that kids are into. Highly recommend watching them first just to make sure everything is good. But my kids really like to do that as well. The last one is Cuckoo Kangaroo. It is a huge love in the 3rd grade. They loved Cuckoo Kangaroo, which was great. I did too. They have so many fun, engaging songs that are silly too. So brain breaks are always a really good thing to throw in. And I'm sure a lot of you know that, but the reminder to have it in your lesson and write it in your lesson is key, because I would forget unless it was written in my lesson to do it, or in my slide when I was teaching, because you just get into it and enjoy it. Pear Deck. Obviously, I love Pear Deck. Pear Deck has been wonderful for so many reasons. There's their little logo. I was able to use Pear Deck for a variety of different ways in my distance learning this past spring. I had students on a variety of different levels, and I used Pear Deck to do small synchronous lessons with kids, but I also used it to do student run and student paced lessons. It was nice, especially for a hybrid model, to be able to record yourself teaching and then have your students do it at home if they're going to be at home that day. But it's also great to use it in your classroom too, because you can use it in a whole group setting. So it does really make it seamless for your kids if they're working at home that day, or if they're going to be working with you in the classroom, or for distance learning. Like I said, in the spring when I had distance learning, I used Pear Deck for reading. I used it for doing things like perimeter and area. I had it with one of my students who was working on counting. So I use it in a multiple different ways, and my parents truly loved it that I worked with. They said it was really engaging and fun, and that their kid just wasn't sitting and staring at a screen. So it made it interactive for the kids, and they were more engaged and willing to learn with me, especially if I created slides that held their interest. Epic. Epic was great for differentiation for my students. It was one thing that I really enjoyed doing. We did a mystery unit at the end, and it was great because I could create little libraries for my students and assign them books or things that might pique their interest or things like that. They did have free versions of this too. A lot of these things were district provided for me, but I know a lot of them have free versions too. Boom cards. If you follow me on social media at all, you know that I'm an absolute lover of boom cards. Boom learning is truly wonderful, and it gets kids engaged with a variety of topics. Boom cards are great because the kids can have their own login, so you can assign students different things at different levels. It is self-correcting. It has audio and visual feedback, and it's no prep for you. Buy it, add it to your library, or create it, add it to your library, and pass it off to your students. It's wonderful. If you get the premium or the paid version, there is the ability to track the data and how your students did, and that was key for me for IEP goals this spring. Screencastify. Screencastify was a great option for me too. I recorded my screen, me using manipulatives and visuals and doing a lot of things so the kids could see me doing it. But also a friend gave me the idea that she did read alouds with her kids. So if you have a younger population or any population who doesn't love a good picture book, you can read a book via Screencastify and leave pauses and ask questions like you would if it was, like on Nick Jr., where they stop and pause and give that great option. Other things that I used this spring, especially with the self-contained environment, was unique learning systems. Unique learning systems was one way that my school provided a curriculum for science and social studies instead of self-contained teachers having to create it all the time. They also have an online platform too with Unique. That is a really great way to collect data and work with your students on a differentiated level. Mac and Via was great. It also is really similar to Epic. It has a wide range of books. So if you want kids to learn about Rome, ancient civilizations, you can use Epic or Mac and Via to have them read aloud, have the books flip, which I really do like in Epic. It reads along with the books and highlights the words, which is engaging for kids. Learning A to Z was another option that we used as just a resource tool. A lot of times you can write grants for some of these, or sometimes PTAs or PTOs give a little bit of money. I highly recommend looking into them for the paid subscriptions. Boom is a really cheap one, a cheap way to get data for your students. All right, tip number 3, let's talk about visuals. As a special education teacher, visuals are my jam. So they really allow for communication to be more seamless with kids. Some kids don't learn auditorily, or yes, auditorily. Some kids learn visually. So having a visual of what you want the kids to do is great. With distance learning, if I needed the kids to have scissors or glue or a pencil or paper, I would always put a visual up on my Google slide so that the kids knew, like, oh, she wants us to have this. So before I started class, I would always have, do you have, and then the picture right there for them. It also is really nice so you don't have to repeat yourself, especially when you're back in the classroom. I had them on my lanyard, or I would just put pictures on their desk or even draw a little picture with a whiteboard and marker to keep the kids from asking me constantly what they needed. One that I did that really gave students the ability to have some independence was I had a student that went home differently almost every single day. I made a quick visual for this student, put it on their desk, or we put it in their agenda, and it just gave them that sense of independence that they didn't have to ask me how they were getting home each day. So I talked about visual learners and how it's beneficial for them also just to have those up there. You can even just print them out, draw them, whatever you think your kids are going to need to make it beneficial for them to learn better and easier. One thing that I did over distance learning was my students had we learned about elapsed time, and it became quite apparent that even with all the YouTube videos I was doing, the screencastifies and all the different things, they were having some difficulties. So I made them these clocks. I found a free printable on Google, printed the clock, and I used Astrobrights because who doesn't love Astrobrights? To make their arrows. I happen to have brass fasteners at my house, but if you don't have those, you can use a variety of other ways to keep that intact in a clock. This was something that I made for my students, used as I was doing a screencastify because I didn't have my Judy clock handy, and they caught on so much faster when they had the visual. I'm also lucky enough to live relatively close to a lot of my students, and I left them on their front porches so that they would have some too. This is something else that I did for every single unit we taught over distance learning. I made them flashcards or something they could print or also just have off to their screen if they didn't have access to a printer when learning and doing their daily lessons asynchronously. So this was just a quick little snippet of, we learned 2D shapes of things that I had for my kids. It also is great to have quiet reminders. So this year I plan, when I do my more synchronous things, I'm going to have little things on popsicle sticks to hold up, like quiet voice, listening to your peers, things like that. Whoops, there we go. It's also good to have etiquette and good reminders for students. They have all of these things on Teachers Pay Teachers that you can download and buy for Zoom meetings. You can create your own too, but that has to show like practicing, especially kids that are just starting out with distance learning. They might not know all the symbols, but if you hold up the symbol that has like the no mic or the mic, giving them the okay to talk is a really beneficial way. All right, tip number 4. Having 2 sets of materials. This might sound crazy, but I know a lot of us are going to be moving from one phase to another, and having 2 sets of materials is just going to be beneficial if it's possible. All of these things I'm saying might not be possible for you, and that's okay. These are just ideas to throw out sometimes to your admin. So a math or reading curriculum, even if you can grab an extra student manual to have at your house to refer to, or sometimes you get new manuals. We, for our reading curriculum, they had changed the edition that they used, and we got to keep our old editions. Now, the new edition honestly didn't have much of a difference in it, but you could ask your administration, hey, can I take this home and keep it at my house in case we decide to change? It just might be a better option for you to have 2 things, because I know when I leave my house in the morning, my husband's always like, are you moving out? Because I have my lunchbox and my bag and I have my laptop bag, and I just honestly look like I'm carrying like 6 things, and I'm just going to school for a few short hours. So asking if you have a math or reading curriculum handy, an extra set, might work for you. Also, sometimes they have the e-version of them now, like where you can get the online version. Check that out as well. Manipulatives, especially if you're going to be creating and making videos at home, borrow your manipulatives from your classroom. Take half of a set of money or your Unifix cubes or coins, whatever you're going to be doing. A Judy clock, I highly recommend it. You never know where you're going to need it. If you have those things, take a set home and just have them just in case you want to record a quick video at home. That way you're not trying to create things at 11 o'clock at night. Everyday materials. This is going to sound crazy, but over the springtime, I didn't have a stapler at my house. I just don't have one. I realized I was going to click together a bunch of IEP goals and things, and I realized I don't own a stapler. So whenever I have access to my school again, I will be getting the one off of my desk to bring home with me. I have 2, so I will get to keep one at home now. But having things like pens and papers and sticky notes and lesson plans, I don't keep a lot of that stuff at my house. So when I go back in to the school and I'm able to bring materials home for distance learning this fall, I'm going to grab some of these things. Lesson plans, what I highly recommend is taking a picture, especially when you have your week planned out. You never know if you're going to lose it, spill your coffee on it. Just having a picture of it is great just to reference really quick. If you go, oh, rats, I don't know what I need for science tomorrow. And I always have my phone handy and somehow don't seem to lose that often. All right, tip number 5, delegate and collaborate. Teaching assistants. I have worked with my fair share of paras or teaching assistants over the last few years. I have had truly some of my best friends were my previous teaching assistants. Things that I've learned from delegating and collaborating, and it took me a few years. When I started teaching, I was young. I did work as a para for 1 year prior to obtaining my teaching position. I learned that my teaching assistant was absolutely wonderful, and she loved to have things to do. So one of the things she said was, Ashley, your monthly lessons and your monthly things, can I just switch those over for you? And I was like, yes. Those little tedious things that sometimes we forget as teachers because I was more focused on an IEP I was writing or something else that had just come up. She was like, do you care if I just take this over? And I was like, please do. Talking to your teaching assistants and asking where their strengths are is also something that I'm going to recommend. The schedule. My teaching assistant was like, can I change the schedule every day? And she had a student help her. And I was like, please do. Just those little things were so beneficial on my end because it was one less thing that I had to worry about, and it gave them a sense of purpose in the classroom, and which is what you want. You don't want it to be just your way. It should be a collaborative group that you work with as a big team. Grading. One of my paras one year loved to grade papers, and I was like, all right, if you want to grade them, perfect. If you want to put the stickers on them, great. One of my students actually loved putting stickers on papers, so I gave that student the task the one time. Monthly check-in. I always found that if I did a monthly check-in with my paras, and you can even ask them what they prefer, weekly, monthly, bi-weekly. We did a monthly check-in. I know a lot of teachers, including myself at times, would bring muffins or donuts. It goes a long way when they're more willing to come in paras, because I know they don't get paid. Mine got paid from the start of the bell to the last bell, and that was it. But they were more willing to come in for 10 minutes to do a quick monthly check-in when I brought donuts and coffee. Why not? Who doesn't love a donut and a good cup of coffee? Stations. I ran a lot of my classroom time on stations. Having a para be in charge of switching out materials or being in charge of an actual station was great. When I was a para many years back, I had one of the teacher gave me the responsibility to run a station. I had so much fun running the station. I was shown and modeled how to take the data, do all of the things, and it was great for the teacher because at the end of the 9 weeks, I handed her the data sheets and she was extremely grateful for one less thing that she had to do. So para run stations. A co-teacher. This past year, I worked with 3 different teachers with 3 different teaching styles and 3 different methods. So working with a co-teacher, having frequent check-ins is key. That was one thing that I did. We had a CLT meeting, a collaborative learning team meeting as a whole group, but then I made sure that I checked in with them individually to make sure I was holding up my end of the bargain. What did I need to do? Were they going to change lesson plans and things like that? Their teaching styles, adapting your style to their style is good. One of my teachers that I worked with absolutely loved using visuals and making anchor charts. Another teacher that I worked with, she preferred to draw the anchor charts herself or have me do it or have the kids do it. And I loved that. I loved their different methods and I loved their different styles. And it really was engaging for me. And I learned a whole lot. So sometimes taking a step back and watching what they do and taking in things and learning from them is great. It's a really good collaboration tool. I always checked in on Thursday to get their lesson plans when I was working with the general ed teachers on Thursday. A lot of them would make their lesson plans on Thursday, submit them Friday to admin, but that way I could look over them on Thursday and then ask my questions on Friday. Because the last thing that you want to do is bother a general ed teacher over the weekend and be like, hey, actually, I have a question about this. And it gave me the option on Friday to fully prepare for Monday, because the last thing you want to do is wake up late on a Monday, your shirt doesn't look right, or you spill your coffee, or your kid gets sick, or something happens and you are running out of time. And you get there Monday and you're like, oh, rats, I'm not prepared. So I did learn the hard way a few times that having everything ready on a Friday is key. So I am finished chatting your ear off now, but in case you think of something in a week or 2 weeks or something, I want to say this is how you can find me. I'm primarily known on social media as Spectacular Days. If you think of a question pertaining to something that I spoke about today or one of the resources that I shared, feel free to email me at spectaculardays@gmail.com. I have an Instagram, a Facebook account, a Pinterest account, a Teachers Pay Teachers account with all titled Spectacular Days. I'm in the process of moving over my blog to WordPress. It's not quite done yet. It should be done in the next week or two, but I will have a lot more tips and tricks on my blog of how I'm working distance learning and hybrid learning into my daily life. So what I want to know from you is, how can I help you? What are questions that you have that I might not have answered in my presentation, or that I might not have elaborated on, or something that popped into your mind? What can I do to help you? Can they see me? Okay, I'm just waiting in the private chat for comments. Or anything, any tips on using Pear Deck with a co-teacher? Yes. Okay. So I used Pear Deck with my co-teachers, and a lot of times what we did was we used Google Slides was the platform that we were using last year. It might be different. We have a new platform this year, but honestly, looking together and using Google or a platform that you guys can edit together was really key. And we talked about it ahead of time. We would kind of go, okay, Ashley, you're going to do this part. I'm going to do this part. Or sometimes what I would do is take what they did and I would differentiate it a little bit. And my teachers were very understanding about that. So I would say, this is 33 slides. I feel like I could differentiate it or like modify it a little bit to making it only 26 and shortening it based upon my students' IEPs and all their accommodations that they had. Yes. What is the best way for inclusion? Okay, so every school is going to have obviously different requirements of you, but getting your kids engaged, your students engaged in learning, finding what their likes and dislikes are is a big key. So I plan in my beginning parts of the school year doing like little meet and greets and asking what they did over the summer, what are their interests and things like that. And then tailoring a lot of even if it's your math lessons and word problems, like if your kids are really into like Ninjago or, anything these days that your kids could be like Pokemon, tailoring to sometimes your math words or even your reading that they have to do on their own to that's a really good way to do that. One of my students was really into beach balls this past year. So I did anything beach ball related, addition, subtraction, we did patterns, we did numbers, we did counting. This kid loved beach balls and he was way more into listening to me when there was a beach ball on the screen. What is the biggest challenge with teaching students to use different tools or virtually to keep in mind? Keep mentioning script, but tips welcome. Okay. Always, what is the biggest? So a lot of times with the different tools, honestly, the beginning part, our third graders, when I initially started with distance learning, were not familiar with, doing Google Lives and Google Chats. So we did a lot of like playing Simon Says, like, all right, everyone turn your mic off. And we held like the microphone up and we tried to show them how to do that. I think a lot of the biggest challenges too in the spring we had was keeping them engaged for long periods of time. So like incorporating brain breaks more frequently this year is going to be key. For them just sitting and listening to me talk or read a book wasn't as exciting. But I did do a lot of learning about how I can make it a little bit more fun this year. So definitely adding brain breaks and giving kids choices. So sometimes I would give them the choice when I would do my sync sessions of, okay, these are the 3 things we have to do. I'm going to pick a name out of a hat. Oh, Billy, you got to be chosen. Billy, what do you want to do first? Might help keep them engaged a little bit more. Choice boards. So any suggestions on running a Sped classroom with multiple grade levels? Choice boards are good, but however you would do almost a small group in your multiple grade levels would be good. I don't know if you're talking about a self-contained class, but a lot of times I would find, science or social studies to be the ways we could do a large group instruction or even reading and then differentiating what they were doing from there. If you have kids using, like I had students that would use AAC devices, always try to prep and make sure that their AAC devices have the questions that you're asking for in there. I know a lot of my self-contained teacher friends did choice boards to make things a little bit easier in that way. But if you have to do sync sessions, I highly recommend either seeing if you can do smaller groups and making them, like a small group environment, like 3 or 4 kids and put them based upon level. I hope that helps. How long are your classes? Okay, so last year for distance learning, it was a little bit different. This year, they are requiring us to do a little bit longer. Our actual schedule has not come out for the elementary level. They haven't solidified it yet, but we are going to be doing about 90 minutes to 120 minutes of sync sessions throughout the day. That doesn't mean all at one time. So we could have like a 30-minute session here, a 20-minute session here. But in the spring, I found that About 30 minutes was all my students could sit and do a small group activity with me in third grade. Okay, so brain breaks in middle school. Finding out what things that they love and enjoy, even it could be something of a lot of teachers did like scavenger hunts in the spring, which was kind of fun. It could be, it gets them up and running. Like, go find something red in your house, go find something blue, go find something that's a circle. If you're working on, you could make it fun, like do 10 jumping jacks once you finish your presentation or your math problem. Um, or things like that. Go Noodle, it does go, like they do have a lot of fun ones. And like I said, the Just Dance is fun. Kids might not like that, but you could even have them like doing scavenger hunts. I know my neighbor down the street, she did one with her 6th grade reading class and they absolutely loved it. I'm new technology. I've been teaching for 18 years and now I feel like a newbie. What should I do for all these tech platforms? There are tons of Facebook groups out there. I highly recommend them. And looking on there, but also asking. We have like a technology instructor, asking those, looking at YouTube videos. We're learning a whole new platform this upcoming school year. So I'm going to be in the same position. I feel like I'm a newbie too with this new platform we're using. But honestly, just playing with it on your free time, if you do, I mean, it's hard to add that in, but I played a lot with Pear Deck on the side before I started using it with my students. But looking at Facebook groups, if they have them, um, even just your own Facebook or any social media that you work with, try that and ask your teacher friends. Because a lot of times I would screencastify a video for a friend of mine for showing her how to use Boom, and she would screencastify a video for me on something like that, on whatever platform I was asking questions on, because I'm a much more visual learner. But good luck this school year. I know you're going to do great. Our school system is doing a full day of distance learning. How will we keep students engaged? Okay, so this is something that I am on the same boat as you. We are still waiting for a little bit of information from our school board, exactly how we're going to keep it tailored. But if you can do small breakout groups, or that's my biggest thing, is if you can do a small breakout group, giving the kids an agenda, because I know that if they know like they have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, timers might keep them engaged. um, this is something that I'm going to be working with as well. But brain breaks are key. Like, let's do one activity and then a brain break. Even if the brain break is them standing up and doing 5 jumping jacks, or bringing them back by asking them a question, or even playing, like my teacher played hangman with some kids, some of the co-teachers I did, doing things to break it up and not make it all like learning, in that sense. It could be fun to do it that way. So hangman might be a good option. Having them do boom cards, to break it up as well. I hope that some of those suggestions are helpful. But if I do have any more suggestions, check my blog in a few weeks and I promise I'll add a blog up to add some of those suggestions out. But good luck this school year. Have you utilized, be comfortable with technology? Okay, so this is a great question. The current para that I worked with this past school year was not comfortable with technology. So I did a lot of screencast videos to show how to do that, how to work it, and we practiced. I almost made like a fake student in a Google Classroom for her to practice with. Also, just having them do things behind the scenes if you want. Like, you could have them, I know you're not going to be doing a lot of worksheets, but they could, this is a really good question, but I'm trying to also think on the spot too. I use a lot of mine were not comfortable with technology, but the Screencastify videos helped them. And then if you also make a dummy account, I know I said that, for them to practice, but they could also just go into like Boom Cards and like keep scores of all the data and keep like your records that way for you. That might be something to try. Sorry I don't have a lot more information or a lot more tips for you, but if I think of any, send me an email and I'll email you back. But I want to thank you all so much for coming to my session. It really means a lot to me. This is my first time speaking, so I appreciate it. Thank you guys